Putin says major global shifts are underway. The liberal idea has become obsolete, he told the Financial Times. It has come into conflict with the interests of the overwhelming majority of the population. Jamie Rubin is here. He's a former Assistant Secretary of State for the United States. He joins us live now. Jamie, thank you so much for being with us. So is populism having its moment to shine? Is Vladimir Putin right on that front?
Well, I think objectively it is certainly true that populist leaders or autocrats in places like Brazil, like Hungary, to some extent the Polish government these places are not pursuing the ultimate liberal ideal of the rule of law and democratic values. Philippines is another example of that, and certainly China would like the world to believe that its model of essentially authoritarian capitalism is the model of the future. And we hear that a lot. It's certainly popular to say that. I don't believe it's really true in the end. It's having its moment. I think there'll be a backlash against authoritarian populism when people realize the damage that it can do. In China, for example, millions of people are living under an Orwellian nightmare where you have actual technology used to track people's movements. Now, that may be growth in China, but these are the downsides. And I think in other parts of the world, as we focus on these downsides, there'll be a backlash. But for now, he certainly got it right.
But there is already a backlash when it comes to, for example, populism in the United States. On the one hand, you have the election of Donald Trump. But on the other hand, you have the fact that the Democratic Party, as we saw yesterday in the debate, is moving further and further to the left. I mean, people are talking about the word socialism. And then you have the fact that in 2020, the Democrats have put up more women and minorities than ever before. On the one hand, you have Brexit happening in the UK, but on the other hand, the UK did actually elect its first Muslim mayor of London. So on the one hand, yes, you have, it's sort of, the pendulum is swinging in both ways. You have populism on the one hand, but at the same time, backlash, as you mentioned, on the other hand.
And it makes for a very confusing melting pot for all of us. But I certainly agree that there has been a backlash in the United States. Last November, we had a real poll, a real actual vote, and the Democrats slaughtered the Republicans in the Congress. It took a while for people to appreciate it because the voting came in over several weeks, but the Democrats won more seats in Congress than they'd won since Watergate. So it was a big backlash.
Two Muslim female congresswomen got elected.
So that's encouraging, but I think we have to acknowledge that whether it's Saudi Arabia, China, the Philippines, Poland, Hungary, Russia, there are authoritarian leaders who are feeling their oats, and they are feeling that the President of the United States is endorsing somehow their approach when it comes to things like free media and the free press, and that's discouraging to us Americans. The United States really should be the country that speaks up for freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, the basic Bill of Rights, the basic democratic values that we've helped bring to Europe, to Eastern Europe, which all these countries now have the ability to vote for populism because they have the ability to vote. Before they were under communism and they couldn't vote at all.
And who fills that void now that the United States has sort of vacated its role as sort of, I don't want to say world policeman, but,
certainly world arbiter of democratic values, I would agree. Look, the United States has definitely stepped back. This has been going on for, unfortunately, many years, since really the Iraq War. The United States public has been reluctant to see America play the same kind of leadership role that it played during the time that President Clinton was in office, for example, and Donald Trump has made clear that he's focused on economics, not solving political conflicts or solving military conflicts. He wants to get out of Syria, he wants to get out of Iraq, he wants to avoid these problems. But as we've seen, and he'll see as well, these problems come home to America whether we like it or not. So in Iran, we have a situation now where there's a potential conflict between Iran and the United States. In other parts of the Middle East, whether we like it or not, there are terrorist groups who would like to bring damage to the West. And so the United States can't stick its head in the sand as much as some might like it to.
So just bringing it back to Vladimir Putin, how does Vladimir Putin benefit from the cracks in liberalism we're seeing?
Well, I think he benefits by the minimal criticism he's getting from the major powers in the world. When the United States is strong and powerful and pushing democratic values in the world with the wind at its back, say in the late 90s when peace and prosperity reigned, the Russians are feeling on the defensive. Mm-hmm. They have to deal with an America that's ascendant, that is criticizing breakdowns in human rights, criticizing, if it's interfering in Venezuela or Syria. But when the president is not doing that, when the United States is happy to let Russia enter the Middle East or interfere in Venezuela, then they are feeling their oats. And that's the problem. We need a counteraction from the United States president, and we haven't seen that, unfortunately.
Right. Jamie Rubin, live for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.